Well, hello, everybody.
Hi, everyone.
I'm Valerie.
And this is Sheila.
And we are
Today's
Litches. And if you don't know what that means, we'll be up front. Lady
bitches. We're pretty good at it.
Yeah, so we've been told anyway. Anyway, we would like to start our show today. And I think we first want to wish everybody Happy St. Patrick's Day.
Especially happy to those who are Irish.
Absolutely. And for you Ryans out there.
Definitely have a beautiful, happy St.
Patrick's Day. And some green beer.
Yes.
Yeah.
Why not?
And so we wanted to highlight new news. It's not new news. It's
No.
been St. Patrick's Day all day.
All day.
Yeah.
I'm wearing green, although
you can't
it's
really.
a very dark green.
I would argue that it's so green it's almost black.
Yeah, but it is green.
Okay. I'm not wearing green. Green is not my color, unfortunately.
Okay.
But hey,
I agree.
for those of you who are, I suppose I could have found like a green pin or something.
Yeah.
So happy St. Patty's Day.
There we go.
There we go.
Okay, and now I also, before we get started, you know what we didn't do?
What?
Forgot to tell everybody, this is our show, Sandwich Generation.
Welcome to Sandwich Generation. Our generational perspective, because
That's
we're
right.
what? Gen
Gen
Xers. And we have our parents above
And our children and
grandchildren below.
Yes.
So it's sort of our unique perspective on life's issues.
Yeah.
Hey, so new news, back to new news.
Okay.
Let's see. Oh, yes. Indigenous or First Nations missing
Indigenous
and First Nation people across Canada.
That's right.
For whatever reason, it does not get widely reported. And there's been a few incidents recently where I've come across something that there's one in Manitoba. They actually, 6 days after being reported missing or something like that, they were she was 6 months pregnant and she was found in a suitcase and it didn't even make national news. So we just wanted to bring that to people's attention.
Yeah.
That there's a lot of those issues, particularly on the prairies.
Yes.
But with that, things like that aren't getting reported or not making the mainstream news
that we need to hear. So,
right. So without watering it down, we just wanted to bring awareness to it.
Right.
And that being said, we can get into our topic.
Yay.
So, yay. It says fun with divorce, separation, and then says, well, not. There's nothing fun about it.
No, there isn't.
I thought we kind of came to the agreement tonight. We would kind of keep it on the lighter side, more the humor side of things, only because it is quite a heavy and an emotional topic.
Hi, Mom. Yes, and let's face it, Val, that's one of the reasons why we really haven't done this.
We haven't.
Is because it's a very sensitive subject for our family because it touches our families.
Right.
So, of course, it makes it more difficult to discuss things openly when it pertains to your own family. And that is my parents, our parents, are divorced.
Mm-hmm. We're sisters.
Right. My sister has had divorce.
I've been divorced. Yes.
So in that sense, understanding divorce, we have a few different perspectives because that's the other thing. You previously worked in the courts, so you have another perspective.
Right. So
you worked in family courts too, so that was a completely different perspective.
Right. So family law was my background for sure for well over 25 years.
Right.
And for those of you who know me already know that. And for those of you who don't know, I'm retired from that. So at this point in time, like you said, it's been a very touchy subject. Because it affects our family.
Yes.
Both directly and indirectly, where you can speak to the child.
Yeah, I can speak to the
child
person that
of
went
divorce
through it
and separation.
Yeah.
Right. I can speak to the child, the person actually getting divorced, and then the person actually working within the system of family law.
You have way more of a perspective, but
and don't think for a reason that like a lot of people think that I went into family law because of absolutely not. It was something that I fell into.
Actually, that came after the divorce.
Oh, way years. It's something that I fell into and became very passionate about for different reasons. My passion for family law was more about the children. And basically trying to keep matters out of court, not in more of a conflict resolution sort of aspect. But
and it's a nasty subject. Like people really, you even mention divorce or separation and they're like,
because there's so many,
and so many people have so many different perspectives.
Absolutely. But, and I mean, like you and I, we will laugh and joke and things.
But we do, but some of it is not, isn't funny, but it is funny.
It's funny, but it's absolutely not something you should do.
No.
Right.
So we have a perspective of a little bit of maybe some do's and don'ts.
Yeah.
You know, things you probably shouldn't do. And we know this.
So should your significant other be cheating, or you have the perception that the party is cheating, and you feel it necessary to do some investigating?
I call it reconnaissance.
Do not include your children on those missions. Okay. So we can laugh about it now because it seems kind of funny.
But it's no different than even thinking about like cheating, for instance, right? Like we talk about that and people will say that, like I've heard I'm just talking about cheating is just one divorce reason. Like there's a million reasons to get a divorce, but cheating's just one, right? And I guess you could say that even your kids shouldn't even know. No. Really? Your kids have no reason to know.
And I guess I've always been about...
That's an adult thing to discuss with another adult, not something an adult discusses with.
And then you run into the issue that adults have adult discussions, and hey, you're allowed to have a discussion with an adult. The issue becomes when children are around when those discussions take place.
Oh, okay.
Right? So what I'm saying is you may think, okay, and this coming from a very nosy person, you may think that your children
she's nosy.
Are not listening, but
they're listening to everything.
They're listening to everything.
And that was my other perspective. If you really want an honest perspective, remember I said to you earlier when we were talking, I was like, hey, so here's what I can tell somebody, that at 13 years old, you can learn. And people like to think that they can't, but a 13-year-old and a 12-year-old, even younger, can learn how to manipulate the situation to benefit themselves in some wonderful way. And
they will.
And that's why I say, like, people don't understand that though.
No.
Like, and I can understand that. That's my perspective because I was that 13-year-old manipulating situations to fit.
Right. Because, well, let's face it, kids aren't dumb.
No.
Right? And they will.
Especially if you got a half-wet smart one. Ooh, you're in trouble then.
Well, and
I'm just joking. I'm just saying that.
I'm saying it, and I say this too. Yes, children will manipulate the situation. They always will. To their benefit. And it's like I was saying to you earlier, when you have a child in front of you, well, my mom lets me go out at 5:30 in the morning and play, even while she's still sleeping. I'm like, yeah, you have to think for a second, right? Because the reality is...
Do they really?
No. And I knew it wasn't true, but I knew he would, I knew at the time I was being told this because that's what he wanted to do. And that is like saying, oh, well, Dad lets me eat pizza till 12 o'clock midnight, right?
Yeah.
And the thing is, qualifying that is one. I think when there's... Here's what happens when a marriage breaks down or a long-term relationship breaks down like that. The trust is gone. Right now, no two parents ever parent the same. We know that, right? Because they weren't raised in the same home. But when you live in the same family unit, you make it work. Right. But what's amazing to me is that when that unit separates, all of a sudden the parents become bad parents in each other's eyes. Because do you see what
they were a bad parent, but they weren't.
But no, it had
while you were with them.
While you were with them, they became a bad parent because all of those little
the
things
day you divorced
that you didn't like because they said or did this and you didn't agree with it. All of a sudden, when you separate and divorce, because of the emotions, because of the hurt feelings, right?
There's so much more.
It just builds and it becomes exacerbated, right? And unfortunately, the children are stuck in this and they will manipulate, lie, scheme, whatever to get what they want. And I would always say this. So, okay, flash forward, your child is now in high school and you get the call from the school that, you know what, in 128 days, he's only bothered to show up,
so many days,
48 days out of that 128, right? Anyway, so the parent gets on the phone all upset, calls the other parent and says, this is what's happening. He's skipping school, not going to school. And then it starts. Now, this can go one of two ways. It goes, the attack starts. Well, if you were home more often, or if you weren't out with your friends, if you, and as soon as we feel attacked, we have the defense to either attack back or rebuild up that wall.
That's right.
And so what ends up happening is that child has now learned that when I get mom and dad arguing, guess what? There's no consequences to my actions.
None.
Because they will be in World War III. Meanwhile, the skipping school issue kind of falls
just
down.
Fell away.
Right, because now they're too busy either blaming or defending. Right. And I think that's a lot of the miscommunication. Things have changed a lot, and I think we were going to talk about that. Generational thing.
Things have changed so much. So from say the 70s, 80s, 90s,
yes.
First of all, divorce is more prevalent.
Okay, so first of all, let's go back to the 80s. So in the early 80s, I'd say 1980 to 85, people
started talking
more about it, and you started hearing about a friend's parent getting divorced or something like that. So you were aware of it, right? And then, we can say it happened. But the thing is, divorce and separation, the baby boomers actually
were one of the first.
One of the first to really, and for a variety of reasons, we could debate this all day.
We had talked about how women having rights meant they had alternatives to putting up with shit. That was one.
That was one.
That was just one, right?
That was one aspect. Yeah, for sure. And then there were a lot of other aspects. But the reality is that divorce and separation is more prevalent. Most children today are of blended families. A lot of children. And so I really think that the whole stigma behind coming from a divorced family or anything, as it was kind of in the 80s.
It's not.
As it's moved forward, it's not so much of a stigmatism attached to it.
No, my kids were actually, I remember my son actually mentioning to me once about how his family was, odd.
Why?
Because he was one of the few kids in his class
where his parents
were actually still together.
And I get that because it seems to be almost the exception to the rule these days, which is sad. And trust me, working within the courts and everything. And
no, you can't ask me what makes us work because I don't have an answer.
No, there is.
People have asked me that. Oh, why have you guys lasted? There's a lot of reasons, I'm sure.
but it is one of those situations that, like you said, it's not that common anymore. It's almost the exception rather than the norm, where back in the 70s and 80s, it was the to be divorced or come from a divorced family.
Normal.
It was not normal.
Not the norm.
Well, you even
it wasn't
said
not normal. It was not
one of your friend's parents.
Yeah, I wasn't allowed to.
You weren't allowed.
She wasn't allowed to come to my house
because
anymore.
Because our parents were getting a divorce.
Yeah, I was still allowed to go to her home to visit,
but she wasn't allowed.
But I wasn't allowed.
Yeah, which
to have her
nowadays that's
even unheard of.
Unheard of.
Yeah.
But I think that one of the things that we wanted to touch on it is the light, like, it's not that it's lighter side, because there is no, one thing I do know, there are no winners.
No.
In separation and divorce, ever.
No one ever wins.
If you think it's like Law and Order, if you think it's, it really isn't.
It isn't.
Nobody comes out a winner.
No.
And we can only speak as products
Yeah.
of separation, of divorce, as going through, and my children being products
Yeah.
of separation and divorce. I would say that we can speak to that.
Yeah.
And I can somewhat speak to Canadian.
Yes, we're very.
Legislation.
That's the other thing.
That's the other thing.
And I just want to, before we even start this series, one of the things we wanted to bring up was, if you are in any way in a physically abusive or violent situation, whether it be right at this moment, which would mean you should be calling 911, or if it's impending and it's coming, then call 911. And if it's something of a situation that you find yourself in and you would like to get out of that situation, there's a 1-800-422-4453. And that's the National Family Violence Resources Hotline.
Right, and what we're referring to and what we're talking about in no way is a reflection of
what we're talking about situation. Is a average, normal, there's no such thing, but a divorce or separation that you've either been through yourself as the person who's gone through the divorce, or maybe you're the child of a divorced family and you have a perspective. That's where we're coming from. Right. The average viewpoint.
I'm just trying to get logged in so we can see the comments.
Yeah, I can see a couple actually. So
here we are now.
Logged in so we can see. Look at that.
I turned it right down.
There you go. And then the other thing is we also wanted to mention was back in when we were first kind of introduced to all this, prior to 87, women were pretty much given custody.
Yes. So, and fundamentally, and see, that's one thing, the area of family law, the Federal Divorce Act of Canada has vastly changed in the last 30, 40 years. Typically in the beginning, the early 80s, late 70s, women were automatically given sole custody, right? Which that is absolutely, I would say, the rarest form of custody nowadays is sole custody. So this area of law, family law, is constantly evolving and revamping, mediation, conflict resolution, dispute resolution, all of that moving forward, trying to move it away from an adversarial court. Right. So when you look at criminal court, you look at even civil court, it's somebody suing somebody, or it's the Crown has charges against somebody, and you have this, right? So it's party pitted against the other. Well, as family law transformed in the Federal Divorce Act, it began in the same adversarial position, which of course you're pitting husband against wife, partner against partner, parent against parent, and it can become really ugly really fast. You're also dealing with probably the most emotional area of law you're ever going to deal with is family law.
Well, it's one of the reasons why you left family law.
Yes. Okay, so, and I think,
let's be honest, is the repetitiveness of seeing the same
Well, no, it's a variety of reasons. Health, okay, has a lot to do with it as well, but that also leads into the type of work that I do,
Yeah.
and stress factors and all that kind of stuff. And, COVID and all that.
Yeah.
Anyways, and the thing is, you just know when it's time. But the reality is that in the divorce separation, we have seen it change and evolve,
Right.
Over a long period of time. Is it perfect? Absolutely not. But I think, like we had talked about the do's and the don'ts. Like if you're going on recognizance because you want to, not recon, if you're going on recon missions,
because you want to check to see if your significant other is cheating,
or
you do not
involve your children. Okay, so that's number one.
That's one. Yes.
Number one.
Okay.
Number
two. But
the
other one is, if you're talking to your child, if you're having a conversation with a child, and it doesn't matter what it is, and they're not happy, and they have a fit, temper tantrum, whatever, get mad, give you the look, do whatever.
Yeah.
Do not compare that to the other party. So, because when you do, that's a negative connotation, meaning that you don't like your child. Right. It doesn't mean that you don't like the other person. It means you don't like the other child, because you don't like the child because you don't like that part of that person. Yeah, but that's a part of you. As I explain, it's one thing that I try to focus on is that children aren't dumb. Don't give me that look. Your mother gave me that look. Or don't do that. It reminds me of your father. Or you're just like your mother, or you're just like your father. You're basically telling your child you don't like that part of them. Yeah. Basically. Yeah. Right. And they will internalize that. Mm-hmm. And the reality is that I think where this has now morphed into a situation where divorce separation is not going away anytime soon, people, but to have a better understanding and educate ourselves so that we are not perpetuating this down to our children. I agree. And the thing is, if you don't know any better. But like we had talked about before, one of the big things is parent alienation. Parental alienation. Yeah. But the other thing is, this is a huge subject. Oh, like this massive. Is a giant subject. We have a very, like I said, unique, kind of different perspectives. Kids of divorce, but also you've had a divorce. I've never been divorced. So it's just a little bit of a different way of looking at things that I think when it comes right down to it, it's like I said, the conniving 13-year-old, and that, that was me. I'm not afraid to admit it. I manipulated the situation around me to fit me because I could. Right. And I love you guys. I know my parents are watching, but I did. And I'm not afraid to admit that because now I'm over 50. Right. So what you gonna do? What you gonna do, right? But because our parents were at war with each other, it made it easy for me to do it. It made it so simple to be able to get away with those things. Absolutely. Because it was easier for the warring factions to keep warring, and then you could go on your merry old way and manipulate to get what you want and do what you want. Right. Right. Because they're too embroiled in the war. Right. The good news is the war ended. Yes. And that's what we're trying to say, though, is right. When you make a conscious decision to change what could be maybe a really bad way to go, and you decide, what, I'm going to find the high ground. I hate calling it the high ground, because sometimes it's actually not the high ground. It's kind of like squished in there. Well, here's the thing, and I always say it only takes one responsible adult. Yes. You are only responsible for your actions. So if the other party is the worst nightmare from hell, right, that
you can create that healthy boundary to shut it down.
Yes.
Right? By not engaging.
And only you.
And only you, by not engaging. And hey, I know what it's like. I've been in that situation.
That's right.
Right? It's really hard not to engage when you feel like you're being attacked.
Mm-hmm.
Right? But the reality is that particularly if you have children, those children love both of you.
Yeah, you like it or not.
You cannot.
And you must have liked them at one point.
I've said it before.
Yeah.
I remember one client, I said, well, you married her because, I mean, the stuff that was coming out of his mouth, you would swear to God this person was Satan, right?
It doesn't say much about your judgment, though. Like, it does, as a person, if you're speaking that way about your spouse, it doesn't say much about you.
That's my point.
Right.
Because the person on the other side of the desk is thinking, well, you married that person. So at some point, there must have been something
right.
that brought you together. And, they say hell has no fury than a woman scorned. Oh, I've seen it.
I've seen both sides. Like,
yeah. Oh, yes, scorned, I've seen it all.
It's not, we've seen, and I have
and my plug is just for the kids. My plug is leave your children out of it.
I don't care. Children don't care if mommy or daddy slept with somebody else.
No,
they don't care.
Nor should they even be involved
telling them
in
that is really none of your business.
Right.
To do that.
No.
It's not
adult issues.
That's an adult problem.
Right. Adult issues,
and
adult
so,
problems.
And it doesn't matter how you try to sugarify that or justify that.
Well, that's another issue.
Right? Because justification, right? People like to justify their actions.
I have seen parents.
I do.
Commit parental alienation over and over and over again because in their mind, their perception, they are saving their children from the enemy. Do you see how?
And that's scary.
Those people you can't get through to, unfortunately.
And it is proven that children, period, do better when both parents are involved, no matter the perspective.
Exactly, when both parents are involved in their children's lives.
Right.
Now, I think I need to qualify something as well, that I can say that we are the product of separation, but I can also say that I was out of the house and living on my own when our parents separated.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You were still at home, but I wasn't. Not that wasn't its own nightmare, but I'm just saying.
Yeah.
The reality is that we were in two different situations at that time. We weren't in the same situation for sure.
Yeah.
But I think the reason why we decided to tackle it is because, one, it's very controversial. It is. Because those people who feel justified in their actions.
And there always will be those, no matter what you say
or do.
They're always going to see how they were right to do what they did or what they do.
Right. So there's a mandatory course when you are going through divorce under the Federal Divorce Act of Canada, that doesn't matter where you live, that you have to take like a parenting after separation or a parent information program. And basically it's the very nicely put do's and don'ts about you don't grill your child after they come home from spending time with the parent, and who is there and where did you sleep, and anyway, that kind of stuff, and about money issues because we know support.
And you don't discuss money issues with your children.
Right. So, and all of that. Now, I facilitated that in a different jurisdiction years ago, and I remember in the classes before everything went online, I always knew that you had the parents that had their aha moments that were like, oh yeah. I really shouldn't
shouldn't have called him a dick.
Yeah, exactly. Or I really shouldn't do that. Or yeah, I do see it. And that's what you want.
Yeah.
Right. But then you get the other ones who will stand up, and no matter what, it's always the other party's fault. Like in their mind, their perception, they don't have the ability to see their participation in all of it, right? So you
on your significant other. was just
yeah, it says, I agree. If you feel that way about your significant other, I think it's time to have a talk with them. Exactly.
yeah.
It's just one of those situations, and I feel so bad for people that are caught up in it. And quite honestly, for most average people going through divorce and separation, the first year is really, really hard trying to get everything, when you're separating,
and it's financially
everything.
Period.
Yeah, period.
Nobody's winning financially out of a divorce.
No, and I say this all the time because they say, well, you know
There's
what?
no such thing.
Whether you have a dual income coming into a house, whether both parties are working, or whether you only have one party working and one income, that family survives on that combined income coming into that house. Now, when you separate, that same income, whether dual or single, now has to support two separate homes. You're going to feel it.
Doesn't matter who you are.
Doesn't matter who you are. You're going to
Which
feel
also
it.
means your children are going to feel it.
Yeah. And so it's I'd like to say there was a pain-free way of getting through all of this.
There is not.
Educate yourself. Read. Look up.
Here's the pain-free way of getting through all this. I'm going to be honest with you.
Okay.
Don't get divorced.
Well, no, somebody asked me that. I had lots and
I don't
lots.
know. I can say that. I say that as a joke.
Right.
Okay. Because
no, but
I know
I've actually
for a fact,
said it. I've actually said it and meant it. About 15 years ago, I had somebody confront me and ask me, because I work in the business, what would be your recommendation? And I honestly, and it was not at work, people, but I honestly
don't get married till
no, I just said, honestly, I believe it's easier to be miserable and stay married.
Really?
Yes, that's what I said.
Oh my gosh.
No,
I'm not a proponent for being miserable and staying married. That is not a good idea.
I don't agree with it. But at the time, it just felt like what you had to go through. Was it really worth the separation, right?
Right.
Do you know what I mean? Now, and that's one of the hardest things, because it is painful. It is difficult to get through all of it.
We're over our time, aren't we?
We might be, but this is going to be a little series here. We're just getting into the crutch of it because we get to talk about property and separation and child support and spousal support and how
is there any integrity left?
Absolutely.
During divorce?
Yes, there is.
Is there integrity during divorce?
One person asked me one time.
I have to wonder.
It must be really, really hard,
daunting almost.
Working here, because at the time it was within the court, and the steady stream of divorce, separation, family law, and at the time, I remember thinking to myself, they said, nobody must get along. And I said, well, actually, that's not true. We don't see the people that separate and get along while they're separating.
Oh, and there are those people.
Oh, absolutely.
Absolutely.
And when I went out on my own, I found a lot of them.
Yeah.
So my hat's off to you. There are lots of you out there that are responsible adults, and you're separating and divorcing, and you're actually doing it right.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Collaboratively, working together.
Trying to find them happy.
So on that end, I think we should end this on a positive note.
Yes.
Let everybody know we're back again next week.
Yes.
To second part on our series.
For sure.
And we'll see you then.
Yes. And we do have someone to highlight next week.
Yes, we do.
Awesome.
Have a good night. We'll see you guys next week. And we hope we gave you something to chew on. Good night, everybody.
Good night.